The Mercedes-Benz GLS 580. This vehicle, as tested, is north of $120,000 and has a starting price around $112,000. The GLS 580 slots in between the 450 and the full-blown AMG 63. The 580 still does have a V8, and this is definitely geared more towards the luxury buyer who wants the passing power and warmth of a twin-turbo V8. The GLS is Mercedes-Benz's largest three-row unibody SUV, and this thing competes directly with the BMW X7. This particular trim is right in line with the M60i, or the twin-turbo V8 variant of the X7. Interior, again, largely unchanged from 2020, which honestly is a good thing. This has the prior generation Mercedes infotainment and electronics, which means they're less gimmicky. You don't have this enormous hyper screen or the big screen out of the S-Class, and you maintain some of the physical controls for things like HVAC and infotainment. However, you still have the haptic mess of switches on the steering wheel, as the car is reminding me that I left the key in this thing. This is a three-row, a true three-row, which means it's actually very, very usable. This thing is geared towards larger families. With all of the seats folded down, this thing is cavernous on the inside. The third row, however, is only large enough for small children or people you don't like. The second row is very comfortable, and unlike the X7, the second row can actually fold flat. And it's much easier to move forward and aft because the controls are physical and you have a tether you can pull down to flatten the seat. It is a welcome change. The seat controls for the rear seats and the front seats are located on the door. It's a bit odd, but you get used to it almost immediately. The front seats, though, are not as comfortable as you find in the X7. However, the massaging function does work better. There's a good range of adjustment for the seat, so if you're a taller or shorter driver, you should be pretty comfortable in this thing. It is very quiet, and there is a lot of glass in this car, which means there's good visibility. This has the higher-end Burmester audio system, which is optional in the GLS, but I'm going to be honest, I think the Bowers in the X7 is a superior system. Yes, this is a quiet cabin, but at least to my ear, it is not as high performing. The overall comfort levels of this car are very good. It is a very, very quiet space, and you have good practicality and storage for the front occupants in this car.
I want slow love, uncomplicated such.
It's a cold October morning, Mark. We're in the GLS 580. I lied, we're not doing a shop segment, because this is essentially the same car that we've already done a video on, and we've talked about this V8 ad nauseum. This thing has rear steer, it has adaptive dampers, and it is extraordinarily comfortable.
I don't think we've ever driven the V8 version of the GLS.
No, we drove the 6 last time.
Because I would have remembered if we did. I'll tell you that much. It makes such a huge difference in overall refinement and drivability. And there's something to be said, and I think the more that we drive cars, this becomes more and more evident with the evolution of engine design going from, down to 4-cylinder everything, or like these 6 cylinders that are lifeless. There's a clear division between commodity car, where 4 cylinders and 6 cylinders you can make an argument, okay, fuel economy and all that, and then you get into a luxury product, you either have to have one of two things: an amazing V8 and a good transmission.
Or a B58.
All right, yeah, or a B58, of course, that's the one exception, or some electric car that has a real range to it. So this is that class of vehicle where it's the de facto, you have to have a V8 in this, unless there's some reason why you went to the dealer and they only had a 6-cylinder and you leased it. This is just such...
Unless you're getting the GLS for cheap. Cheap.
Yeah.
Because this is a $120,000 car.
At this point, this is what, when I think of like the upper end X7, the upper end SQ7, there is a level of like luxury, refinement, and all of that you can make the argument for at this price for a lease product. This does everything that you would want a 3-row luxury vehicle to do. And there's a few asterisks as I have to put there, because to your point, at $120,000, this is more conservative, and I don't know if the Mercedes Dr. Touch hasn't got a hold of this thing completely yet, like all their new ones with the hyperscreen, because we're dealing with the last generation of MBUX and all of this. For whatever reason, it's better for it. I'm going to be real, it feels easier to use, although still very frustrating. I drove this yesterday about 700 miles in 10 hours, and I constantly found myself, like when I come out of Android Auto and back into using things like How do I adjust the brightness on the screen? Well, I got to do that over here for this screen, and you have to menu jump. And getting out of Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, you're constantly having to go back in. Of course, you can set shortcuts to do massager, but the massager stops all the time, so you're constantly interacting with the screen, which is the most frustrating part about it. But really, it makes up for the fact that it's really, really quiet, super, super soft, and very, very comfortable.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we've driven this V8 in a lot of different Mercedes products at this point, and while this is not the full-blown AMG tune, it's still great.
The engine performance for what it is, and the fuel economy that you returned in my 700-mile jaunt, I got about 22 miles per gallon, which is really good, to be honest, and that's highway driving, not city.
An MDX Type S, for reference, gets high teens.
Yep.
The X7 with your N63 gets, what, high teens?
Yeah, high teens on a good day. So the fuel economy is good. The one negative there, despite its great refinement and great power and torque, is the transmission, is the tuning at least, is not the greatest. It has far more stutter than the ZF in the BMW products. And the biggest offensive part about that is the start-stop system, which this freewheels the engine because it's got the 48-volt system. When you come rolling to a stop, it cuts the engine before you get to a stop. And I found more often in this vehicle than I have in anything, there's a stutter that happens when it starts to restart because it's kind of not really fully using the engine yet, and it does this bucking and jerking in traffic. And I have to put it in the highest sports setting here to get it off because there's a physical button to turn it off, but really you shouldn't have to be disabling the start-stop to make the system smooth.
Be smooth.
Yeah, it's not good. I feel like they spent about 5 minutes calibrating it. So that's one thing that I noticed drivability-wise that's botched. The transmission is not quick to downshift either. It seems like it's always in slow motion, unfortunately. Namely, like on the highway with the V8, you think, oh, I have plenty of power. There's times where I wanted to pass like 10 cars and show my superiority complex, and it just does not grab a lower gear in any reasonable time. There's such a delay before it gets going that, again,
this is not the sporty variant though. This is like nursing home, quiet, luxury, big SUV. To Mercedes' point, and I'm sure they'll tell you this, and I don't think it's a true defense, but if you want peak performance, you get the AMG variant.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just saying in general, if you're getting this, those are the two negative things. The trans tuning is far too conservative, and of course, the start-stop sucks.
Would you pick this? So this is this is softer than the X7. This is more couch-like. It has even less body control, and to me, in this like $100,000 big 3-row segment, and if you want this size, you have two unibody options from the Germans, this and the X7.
Yeah.
You have the Range Rover, which, to be fair, we've never driven the big Range Rover.
Yeah.
Or the Escalade, which is,
This is the best riding version, other than the Audi products. This is obviously the Audi product's better, but it's also small compared to
way smaller. The Q7's much smaller.
It's not like a real 3-row like this, so you can rule that out. So yeah, this is, to me, is the best riding in terms of softness and pillowiness without turning into a total boat. The body control's great, and the one thing it does really well, despite having this one has 22-inch Continental tires on it, it does a good job with the high and low frequency impacts. And when you hit some big like pothole or low frequency impact, that shock wave that goes through it, unlike the cheaper cars, you feel the whole thing continue through the car. Where this, it stops that vibration from really being obtrusive to the car. It hits once and it's done.
The body structure and the bushings do a good job absorbing it.
Yeah, and I think that's really the biggest takeaway of this, Jack. I mean, I know you talked about the interior part a little bit, which I'm going to complain about that in every Mercedes, but this by far is probably the best Mercedes product I've driven because it's the most cohesive at being a luxury product and doing what a 3-row customer wants. Yes, the tech is a little bit frustrating, but I've really enjoyed driving this, and I think the V8 experience and how isolated it is makes a huge difference for me. And I really, really like this thing. I don't know if I like it better than the X7, but it's definitely something. If you're looking for a smooth cruiser, like S-Class like SUV, this matches up to the name.
Yeah, this is either the way this has been optioned out. To be fair, this does have most of the luxury packages, combined with, of course, the V8. This is a much stronger vehicle to drive than the GLS 450 we drove almost a year ago.
Absolutely.
Final thoughts on the GLS 580. And let's be real, you're not buying, or more importantly, leasing a 3-row luxury SUV because you care about penny pinching. You're buying this for a very specific set of criteria. One, you have the money and you don't want to deal with a commodity brand like a Toyota Grand Highlander. That might be more usable in many ways, but you're stuck with a 4-cylinder or a hybrid 4-cylinder. You lose the refinement out of the lesser brands in terms of suspension, setup, and isolation, because Mercedes has way more budget to get that right. So, something like a CX-90, right? They only had X amount of money to get all these systems right, and they had to spread it out across a lot of areas, where the Mercedes brand, they have more time to focus on a lot of the little attention to detail, which means it's quieter, it's more comfortable, it rides better over a pavement surface, and the big thing is you're paying all this money to get a V8, something that's disappeared. Twin turbo V8, it's got over 500 horsepower, it has that level of warmth, refinement, it doesn't feel strained, it's effortless, and it gets pretty decent fuel economy if we're being honest on the highway. So you're getting all of that. And to me, this is one of the better Mercedes packages because one, the outside, it looks like a luxury SUV without being tacky. And on the inside, a lot of the inside usability and the outside and the way it drives all is cohesive. They're not trying to make it overly gimmicky. And part of it is the electronics on the inside feels like a half to a generation old. So you still have some physical controls, but really that's the worst part about this because they've overburdened a lot of the simple controls with trying to make everything touch or swipe, all that shit. So that's really the most frustrating part about this. And I found that the cruise control or the adaptive cruise was pretty jerky to the point I was worried about people behind me with the way that it kind of overreacts to braking on the highway. So again, it's all of the damn electronic calibration and the setup of a lot of these cars that's holding some of it back. Because other than that, it's such an enjoyable vehicle. It's super usable. And I think as a lease vehicle, if you're looking for a V8 SUV like this, it's definitely something to look at. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.